Let's start with some introductions. We're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves, where we're coming from, and then a fun question. We're going to tell you if we have any kind of critters in the house that we're looking after, or possibly those cows in the backyard. Amber Smith is going to go ahead and get that started for us, and she's going to tell you also a little bit about our community of women in ranching. Amber?
Hello to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Amber Smith, and I steward Antelope Springs Ranch here on the eastern side of Montana with my husband and 2 children. And I'm also developing and leading the Women in Ranching program, which I will tell you a little more about. Women in Ranching was born in 2016 from an expressed need by land stewards for community building and active support of their critical work. This simple request was answered enthusiastically by Elaine Padarini at the Piscinas Ranch. Elaine, can you wave for us? And Wendy Millett at the Tomcat Ranch, and has since grown into a program at the Western Landowners Alliance with many women from the United States and even a few countries. Winter is expanding its core reach with a belief that investing in women means investing in strong rural communities, improved land stewardship, and increased collaborative and creative approaches in the West. Our work connects and supports, educates and inspires a growing and resilient network of social capital and agriculture. I am going to share my screen and give you just a little snippet of what our year looked like.
We know that we are showered with gifts, and yet we find ourselves tethered to economies and institutions that are relentless in asking what we're going to take with us. Whereas I think the question that we really need to respond to is what spirit has from us. Want to empower a community that sisters will share what it is your heart wants to do. Today, there are more women inheriting, acquiring, managing, studying, stepping up and out as aspiring leaders in agriculture. What is it that we as human people, as women, have to give in return for all of the gifts that we are given? The future of land and people is in our hands.
Every action that we take as a program is designed to resource our community with valuable tools and relationships. We hold space for deep connection and inspiration, allowing women to press into their greater purpose and find increased agency in their lives. In order to answer the pressing needs of our time, climate change, food insecurity, equity and equality, access to land and necessary capital, mentorship and education, just to name a few, we must begin attending to the people closest to the soil surface, the people who understand the change that is necessary and how that change can be led in their home communities. Creating a better world for our children requires action today and demands a broader constituency of diverse and actively engaged land stewards who are equal in conversation about the direction of our collective future. The work that this program does and the community built by connecting women is the work that needs to be occurring at greater depth and a faster pace across the grasslands of the world. We need more circles of community, not less. I'm going to share a quote from Parker Palmer. And I think all of the women that you're going to meet today are living this every single day. And it's what makes them articulating their vision and their purpose and them being inspired leaders possible. Hope is holding a creative tension between what is and what could and should be, and each day doing something to narrow the distance between the two. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's an honor, and I would like to pass the stage to April Martin-Chalfant.
Thanks, Amber. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you. I am in southeastern Montana, and I'm about 4 hours south of Amber. My name is April Martin. I am a member of the Northern Cheyenne Tribe, and I reside on our tribal homelands here in southeastern Montana. We ranch, we raise beef cattle, and I'm the 4th generation on our lands that we own here. And I also run a retreat and community resource center. I'm happy to be part of the circles that Winter hosts, and it's a great way for me to meet new people, and I'm very glad to be here. I'm currently at work, so I have, for animals, I have one coworker. She's a cat, about 1 million years old. She does whatever she wants. She's currently laying in a flower pot looking at me. I think she's taken the day off. Other than that, as I came to work today, there's a herd of antelope right outside of my front door and a whole bunch of grouse. There's a family of coyotes that live around the hill, and one fox. So I'm very glad to be here.
Thanks, Amber. Beth?
Howdy, I'm Beth Robinette. I'm located in Eastern Washington, so that's the far northwest part of the United States, but there's a mountain range between us and the Pacific Ocean, so it's not like Seattle. The climate's more like Idaho and Montana. I'm also the 4th generation of my family on our family ranch, the Lazy R Ranch, and we have a grass-fed beef operation, handful of sheep. And I also do educational programming for women that want to get started in agriculture, and specifically in regenerative livestock. And my animals in my house, my husband, Matt, I have two dogs, 2 rabbits, and 2 cats.
Awesome. Thanks, Beth. Candace, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Candace Weeda Strobie, and it is an honor to be here with all these epic women that are also on this panel. And I'm located in Montana, kind of the north central area, Cascade, Montana. I grew up in agriculture in the Midwest, actually in Iowa, and did various degrees in agriculture, knew that I wanted to be in rural America because that's where my heart is, and ended up meeting my husband, who is from Montana. So we ranch, we have a beef cattle operation there in Montana. We also raise hay, and one of my passions is wellness. And so I'm also a yoga instructor. And I believe that taking care of our people in rural America is really important. And I'm happy to be here, and it looks like we get the pleasure of hearing from Donica next.
Hi, I'm Donica Markigaard, and I'm over here in coastal California. We steward lands in Ramaytush Ohlone territory, lands that are very productive grasslands just south and north of San Francisco. And yeah, really happy to be here with this. It looks like we've got a lot of folks here listening to this, and this has been a really powerful grounding place in my life as women hold so much of the burdens of ranch work and what is outside of our outside of our ranch gates. But just here in around our barnyard and in our house, I was out doing our chores this morning, and so I try to keep the animals out of the house, and all of my kids are at selling the meat at farmers market today. So when I'm at the house, all the animals are outside. It's a different story when the kids are home. But let's see, I took care of this morning probably about 100 pigs and maybe a couple hundred sheep and horses and a donkey, and had company of the dogs and visited the barn cats, and The cattle are kind of off in the distance. So yeah, lots of critters, both domestic and wild, that I get to interact with every day. And I'm really, really blessed to live in a place that's so abundant in life.
Awesome. Thank you. Julie.
So I'm Julie Sullivan. I'm in southwestern, south central Colorado. I live in a large valley. It's 120 miles long, about 60 miles wide. It's at 8,000 feet, and we're surrounded by 14,000-foot mountains. So it's like Tibet as far as the weather and the landscape. Very open, very rugged, very demanding. It calls you to find your tenacity, this landscape. My husband is third generation here on this land. Prior to that, it was part of the Spanish colonial times in Colorado. And prior to that, it was a meeting ground for many tribes in this area. We are a certified organic, certified humane, certified by the Audubon Society as bird-friendly habitat, cow-calf to grass-finish ranch. I also started an apprenticeship program with a not-for-profit here in the United States that's based in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The program's called the New Agrarian Program. It has now grown to, I think, 25 ranches in the Intermountain West. We had over 100 applicants this year to the program. I oversee the mentor training and support for that program, and my husband and I continue to be mentors in that program. And most of our apprentices have been young women who absolutely blow me away with their creativity, their capacity, their courage, their ability to face what the 21st century is asking from us. As far as creatures in my life, there's my husband. We have two dogs, Huckleberry and Hope, who are stock dogs, but also pets. A cat who likes to go to the bathroom and the house plants. We have 3 horses, one who has a very dirty name, obscene name in Spanish, because that's his temperament. We have mama cows, no baby cows at the moment, and then all of our finishing animals. We have coyotes, magpies, eagles, elk right outside the window, and we currently have 2 apprentices who are coming back for their 2nd year. And I believe Meegan is next.
I don't know why I always have a problem with the mute. My name is Meegan Lannon. I run and operate with my husband and 2 kids, Barney Creek Livestock in Livingston, Montana, also known for the infamous Paradise Valley. We're the gateway to Yellowstone National Park, and have the honor to ranch at the gateway of that park. We ranch on Crow and Cheyenne land. We are forming partnerships all over the valley with landowners, and we lease from those landowners to help educate about soil health, regenerative ag, and the ecosystem in which they live, and how we can help them regenerate their land. My daughter also has a small band of sheep that she runs and operates. She's created a coloring book and sold coloring books and raised money to buy her sheep. Frankly, we didn't really think she would do it, but she did it. So she's a shepherdess. Our son is the worm rancher and motocrosser, and keeps us very busy. As far as the animals, we've got an amazing Kelpie named Chuck, an amazing McNabb named Stitch the rock star. We've got Malloy's sheep outside off the steps, and a couple goats. I'm not really sure what they do. We've got some, then the cows are closer to home than they have been in a while, so their rotation's coming back around. So that's what we've got. And I'm gonna hand it over to Paige Lynn.
Wow, thank you so much, Meegan. That's great. It sounds like I could learn something from your daughter. It's an honor to be here. Thank you guys so much for having me as a participant in this really unique conversation. My name is Paige Lynn Trotter. I'm located in Sonoma County. I am going on my 5th year here. I came here to finish a agricultural business and sustainable agriculture degree, two degrees, and ended up establishing myself as a local livestock operator, working for several different ranchers, and primarily contract grazers of both beef, cows, dairy cows, sheep and goats, and which has now become my kind of primary occupation. So I contract graze all over Sonoma and Marin counties. I'm currently in the process of transitioning to Mendocino County, however. So we graze about 20 different land bases, anywhere, depending on our contract season, anywhere from 8 to 30 different land bases. But this year we did about 20 different contracts, and really just got into it with the intention to put animals into the empty spaces that weren't set up for it. Kind of going in line with that passion that like animals belong on the land, including us. And that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing now. Everything from private land bases to public parks to empty spaces in homeowners associations. Just dependent on who feels called to put animals on the land bases around them. That's kind of what I do. And currently I've got a stock dog laying underneath me, Briar, my 2-year-old stock dog, who's with me all the time. And yeah, sheep, goats, guard dog outside, where I currently am. And I'm looking forward to hanging out for a little while, guys. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Wonderful introductions. I hope everybody is excited as I am. So how we're kind of move forward for the next hour is one of the things that we do at Women in Ranching is we have what was called a circle. And so I want everyone to imagine that you're in this massive field with mountains around you. Maybe you're in Julie's area with huge, huge mountains. And we're all sitting in a circle together. And we can feel the breeze on us. We see the sun rising and we feel the warmth. And we smell sage. We smell fresh sage. And what we're going to do is kind of take you through what our circles are about. And it's really just about an open and vulnerable communication flow, something that women, we have such a pleasure of being able to handle. And we're going to flow through 4 different topics. The first one is going to be on culture and identity. So each of these topics will flow through for a couple of minutes and then jump to the next. And again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll answer afterwards. So Julie, can you start us off? Can you speak on the number of ways that a person might not fit the mold that is culturally validated in agriculture?
Well, I think that that has been the journey of my 20 years here since I joined my husband here on the ranch. I was brought up in a city. I started my first profession at the age of 7 as an actor. And when I decided in my 20s to leave the acting profession and I looked for what I really cared about, it was the natural world. That was the other place I had a deep passion and a deep affinity. I was always the kid who hid under a table and talked to the animals at a party. Didn't ask a question in class until I was in college. I really struggled with my own species and I felt much more comfortable with land, with animals, with the wind, with the ocean. And so I decided that was what I was going to devote my life to. In the course of that, I got a degree sort of in a deep ecological program in environmental education. I'd become a vegetarian. And so for a decade, I basically lived in a tent teaching college students how to have a very deep reciprocal relationship, largely with wild landscapes. And I definitely had that opinion that cattle were bad, that grazing was bad, that there was no way for animal agriculture to be done in a way that was honoring the animal, that was a reciprocal relationship. And that was really what I had learned by being immersed in wild places. And that was what was the foundation of my life at that point. And then I fell in love with a cattle rancher. So all of a sudden, he and I were both faced with how do you bring together this disparate world of someone who was raised in an industry where he had been taught that he was not supposed to necessarily think about the animals as individual and care for them with love. You're sort of told in a lot of professional circles that you're not supposed to love your animals. You're not supposed to have a deep affinity for them. And I think that that's actually contrary to what animal agriculture needs to be. I think we need to love our animals, and the people who raise animals for food need to care deeply about them and care about them as individuals and honor them as such. And so we've been on this journey to how do you actually make your living raising animals for food and yet feel like you're not commodifying them. And so that in and of itself, I think, causes you to feel like an outsider, even though perhaps that's the core of the work we do. And I think that's part of what the Women in Ranching Circle has helped me find, is that there are so many of us who are exploring how can we have a relationship that is one that's based and fed by love on a daily basis, and yet still feel that it's okay for us to take that animal's life on the other end of it. So I think I'm still a deep ecologist. Like, I still think that everything on the planet is here for its own purpose and has its own integrity, and it has nothing to do with me and how my business needs to use it. And yet I'm also trying to make my living from the land. And I think that the Parker Palmer quote that Amber read is exactly that dynamic tension that you live in when you really value all life as being equal to your own, and yet you are trying to make your living directly from the planet, so there's no filter between what you need to take from the planet in order to sustain yourself. And so the other thing that I think about a lot is that I think for a lot of sort of conventional ranching, there's this idea that, and I think this is true for life in general, that we're only supposed to be one thing. And one of the really deep influences for me was a book I read, Composing a Life, by Mary Katherine Bateson, who's the daughter of Margaret Mead and Gregory Bateson. And what she wrote about was basically women have always lived lives that were mosaics. We've always lived lives where at different periods in our life cycle, where the crone, we're a mother, where we've always pieced our lives together from disparate things and tried to make a whole out of them. And I actually think that's what we're trying to do with our relationship with the planet right now. We're trying to figure out how we take the pieces of growing food, equity, climate change, reciprocity, love. We're trying to figure out how do those all stitch together into some sort of crazy quilt that has integrity and beauty and is really strong.
I love that. I love that. Beth, can you then take what Julie said and then talk about adding an element of possibly racism and inequity on top of that?
Yeah, I think a lot of my journey over the last decade or so has been really understanding the myths that we tell ourselves about the society that we live in, and unlearning those myths and creating new stories. We're just in a horrifying time in our country right now, living through the middle of a fascist coup that is deeply rooted in white supremacy, and it's really unrecognizable to me from the story I was told about the society that we lived in when I was growing up. You know, it was this story of, you know, my great grandfather was this very poor man during the Great Depression who worked his way to be able to own this ranch, and it's like this sort of rags to riches story. And what's left out of that is the oppression of enslaved Africans and of indigenous people that necessitated or enabled that to be possible. And I think, you know, we're really at this breaking point where we're confronting that in our society. But one of the things that's really been enlightening to me is understanding my own struggles as a young woman trying to become established in my ranching community, and the just sort of general dismissal from older white men that I experienced, especially in my early to mid 20s. And recognizing that as a multi-generational rancher who had every like sort of cultural in to this world, I still felt so blocked out. It really helps me realize that anyone who didn't have that privilege and who wanted to make their way in ranching would really have no entree into it. So that's been really a large part of my work in the New Cowgirl Camp, which is the educational program we do here at our ranch, is how can we kind of create a space that is safe and welcoming and open and inclusive, so that new voices, the diversity that we so badly need in our management of these landscapes, to try and create a space for those seeds to germinate. I won't take up too much more time. There's a lot of stuff to cover, but.
No, that was fantastic. And I think you made a good point there that diversity is such a huge portion of that. It's so important. Amber, if we all live in pretty rural areas, what do you think, or how do you think the connection between rural America and diversity in agriculture plays into this?
That's a really good question. And I'll start off by saying that it's crazy to articulate this, but 19 years ago, when I was in college, I had the privilege of studying abroad in the Middle East. And our introduction when we arrived in Cairo to our student housing was, you are children of the empire. You are a part of the devastating colonial system. You will be heartbroken over the next 6 months. And I think heartbroken, being a woman of white color and of privilege, is the only appropriate response for a time. And I would say I still have moments of deep heartbrokenness, recognizing we have such a long way to go to unpack the system that we're all in, and being able to participate in and lead a program like Women in Ranching, for me, is a first actionable step. I think our very traditional culture places women in very, very specific roles. And so basically we're missing half of the voices that are already on these lands. So how can we help and support those women to have the courage to hold the space they already actually have if the system hadn't told them something different? And I would also like to point out, yesterday I was on the conference and able to hear from one of the Penman sisters at Soulfire Farm. And on their website, they have a take action page. And so I think for any of you who would just like a starting point, there was loads of material there. And so directing our attention to women of color who are doing this work in brilliant and remarkable and inspiring ways, that's a really good place to start.
I like that. I love that. Thank you for the call to action too. We'll make sure to put that in the chat box or answer that later. Make sure everyone can find that link. Candace, how do you then bring it back to your individual self and the importance of maintaining awareness and in your identity with everything else going around in our world, and you being located in rural Montana?
Yeah, it's a constant balancing act, right? I mean, a lot of us have talked about this theme of balance. And, you know, as we look at all of the challenges and opportunities of our current environment of where we live and what is going on in our local communities as a start, one thing that's been really valuable to me is to come back to am I being part of the solution? Am I contributing to a solution? It seems that our society and our communities have gotten very entrenched in this fighting mentality, and really just take a step back, come back to my center and go, if we have these challenges, what are ways we can find solutions? And it can be really simple. And I think that recognizing that we're all part of the environment, the game, the scenario, the ecosystem around us, as humans, we're part of that ecosystem. And so what can we do? What is our individual strength? Because everybody on this call has their own individual strengths, right? And what works for Amber, where she's in Montana, may not be applicable to my situation, but it's really just coming back to, what am I passionate about? What am I good at? And what is my local community need that I know I can make a positive change? And it can be really, really simple. And that's something I think we all, women, to go back to the crazy quilt mosaic Julie was talking about, we all kind of do all the things, right? As women, like, that's just part of our gifts. And so if we can come back to, we don't have to do all the things. We can get really focused in our local community of what's just going to be that ripple that then transfers out into everyone around us. And that energy that we send out may not be the big wave that maybe we've been trained to want, that big response, but just a ripple is enough. And that's been really profound, especially as you migrate into new communities. Being new to Montana, it's like, oh gosh, what do I do here? Well, just, Candace, come back to being a ripple. And I think no matter where you are, that is something that we can think about and just consider what that might look like.
That's great. That's wonderful. So you speak about the energy, and one of the things that we wanted to touch on today is somehow what we're talking about is taking unconventional approaches. And April, you're no stranger to identifying and using energy in possibly what could be called an unconventional approach. Can you tell us a little bit more about that kind of work that you do?
Sure. So land is a little bit different for us. We have, as Cheyenne people, we have a really deep connection to it, and we have a lot of stories with it. But land ownership also for us is a lot different as well. Our reservation, what we ended up with on our own homelands here, is about 444,000 acres. And we own it tribally. You own a small portion of it individually through a thing called the Dawes Act, which was enacted trying to divide this portion up. The Cheyenne people were successful in fighting with Custer over at Crow Agency, and we won that battle, but we paid dearly for it. And how we paid for it was removal of our lands. We were moved to Oklahoma, and we got down there, and it was not a good thing. And so we had some chiefs who were really good leaders, great men, and they decided to bring us back up to Montana because the folks said that they would rather die trying to get home than live in Oklahoma because they were starving and the sickness was just overcoming everybody. So we kind of have this whole thing, and I just wanted to mention that. So we were gathered up, and our flight home was not the best of things, and we were put in a place called Fort Robinson, Nebraska. And every year, it's the 25th year now that this one group has been taking our youth and trying to reconnect them with our history. And it really has to do with about being on the land. So all of the land that they came from Oklahoma, trying to get back to Montana, was traditional lands that we traveled and hunted on and lived on. And so for 25 years, they've taken a group of kids down. They start January 8th. They left yesterday. They stopped at Bear Butte to stop and pray, and they will get down there. And on Sunday, tomorrow, they'll do a breakout, and they will run physically all day and all night to get home, to remind people of what we've gone through. And it's really a powerful thing, and it's a great way for the kids to be connected. And I have been traveling and have come across the runners when it's been 30 below, and the kids are out there carrying a eagle flag and you know, just going on. It's really powerful, something to see. But as unconventional things, so when my grandfather passed away, my grandmother decided to keep ranching. Her children already had their own places, and she didn't want to give up her cows, so she just kept ranching. And I went into construction, and so that was really an unconventional path for me, because there was nobody, you know, in my family that was really in construction. And then I found out that working in construction is really a good way to break a body down. And so I came home to kind of regroup and think about what I wanted to do next with my life. And it was kind of funny, because we were kind of out in the Wild West, and we had a lot of cattle rustling going on, and people were stealing calves and all of this, you know. And I was like, what? This doesn't happen. And my dad said, you better go help your grandma. There, you know, she's got a lot of calves out there, and different things like that. So I started, I thought, well, I can go do this while I'm thinking about things. And it was a good way for me to reconnect. So I spent the next 30 days riding every day. I went through the horse herd that we had there. Some of them were probably not really good candidates for horseback riding and stuff like that. But my dad came over and topped off the broncs, and he would just say, send that one to town. It's going to buck you off, April. But I really spent the next 30 days just reconnecting to the land and re-looking at the pastures and everything, how it was going. And it allowed me to come back and center myself. So I stayed. She said, my grandmother said, you should just stay helping me. So there we were, 2 women ranching. One was 70 some years old, and I was, you know, in my 30s, or yeah, my 30s and stuff. And so people just were like, okay, well, you know, that's April out there ranching and stuff like that. But my grandmother was really quite the woman. And she used to say all the time that we have to be, as Indian people, as Native American people, we have to be ambassadors for Native Americans. You know, you've got to put yourself out there in a way that people can learn more about who you are culturally and stuff like that. So I started the Wild Rose Center to do that. It was a way to allow people to come back on the land, and many women don't get a chance to do that, and it's been really fun for me. I met a wide variety of people from all over the world, and just to share with them the riches that we have within our culture, that, you know, we can share the plant medicines. And so we say that water is life, our spirits need grounding, and that land always remembers us. So this is one of the ways that I'm using land unconventionally, is just to start this whole thing of energy and healing again.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I've seen some of the work you do, and it's pretty incredible, the outcomes of just being around other people who are like-minded. Meegan, in regards to unconventional approaches, you told us during your intro, for example, your daughter wrote a children's book and other things. What other kind of unconventional approaches do you see on your land and your ranch?
Well, unconventional, I'm following goat people, goat folks, in terms of, and I just started doing this and throwing this out there, and I've had a few hits, but just we lease our 200 acres from our in-laws that own the Jordan Ranch, which gave us an idea to maybe try and lease some other places, which is not new. That's not unconventional at all for the folks on this call. But I started to pitch, again, like the goat people, how we can regenerate land and partner with those landowners and have them be part of this ecosystem, and how to, as Nicole Masters would say, have response ability all of us as a team, and seeing the land and how we can regenerate that. And my husband's dream is to regenerate the entire Paradise Valley, and he sees everyone joining in and running their livestock together to the gateway of the park. I don't know if that would ever happen, but I think just really having a lot of fun, and it's a lot like April said, just in terms of educating folks, and like her grandmother was saying, ranchers kind of get a bad rap, and really communicating the land that we're ranching, which is Crow and Cheyenne, the ecosystem, how we can all give back, how we all have a part, where your food comes from. I mean, basically the whole ball of wax. And I think that so far we've been pretty successful in that. Really, out here in Livingston, we have a lot of, and not that it's bad, but we're just different, and really making those landowners a part of that. Malloy really started out, we were asked by our local farm to school program to come and just talk about beef. It was beef month. They have a harvest of the month program. And we were talking, and she loves to draw. And I said, we're talking to kindergartners, and can you draw a coloring page? Because I just don't know how we're gonna keep them focused. So that's really where that started. And then she took that first couple coloring pages. She was taking veterinary science with our local 4-H club here, took that project to the fair, where she was given a red ribbon. And I'm a little competitive, so she gets it. So she was not happy about that red ribbon. And so that motivated her to reach out and email Nicole Masters, Gabe Brown, and Joel Salatin, who, mind blowing. It was like she started crying when she got emails back. It was reminded me of the days when we used to write, your favorite rock star, right? And you're just waiting for a letter back. But Gabe Brown put it on his Facebook page, saying, I can't believe that an 11-year-old is locking on, and why aren't the rest of us really getting on board? So she decided, she wrote a grant to get that published. And the folks that she wrote the grant to gave it to a young woman shepherdess that needed electric fence, which we were like totally excited about. But they said, we'll pay for the first 50 copies. So it started with that, and just blew up. She's published up to 500 copies, and has bought 20 sheep so far. She just bought a ram from Cooper Hibbard here in Montana. It's a big regenerative guy. So she's well on her way. So, and that's just been fun to watch, and have her really work with those folks as well. And they took the time to write back. So I think in terms of unconventional, I'm just always outside the box. And I think that's part of this movement, and that's my ripple, like Candace said, is to really let people know this isn't difficult. It's rather quite simple. We have a saying that, first of all, you just quit killing shit, and then the rest just sort of happens from there.
Nice. I love that you brought in that she received the red ribbon, because sometimes a lot of us have dealt with failure, and it's like I said in my intro, I considered myself failure last year for when we sold our cows, but sometimes there's a silver lining in that. And Paige, Lynn, could you talk a little bit more about when you've experienced failure, or when that has caused you to have to pivot?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Amy. I could talk about failure all day. But I guess what comes to mind thinking of it now and listening to this incredible conversation amongst these women is just that recognizing that failure is an opportunity to adjust and to reevaluate, like what are we missing? Our team in particular, and just for context, that's about five individuals this year. So our team operates seasonally 6 to 8 months out of the year. Me and who was my partner up until this season. We've ended our partnership, but work year round, but then we have 3 seasonal employees. So at the beginning of that season, we really try to establish like, what are our values? And thinking of that, especially this year, we were really reminded that like those values need to be we need to be integrated into our daily action, in the mindset that we hope to create the world that we want to share and we want to live in around us. We need to live our ideals daily. And so thinking of what Beth said about having to live in this horrifying time, it was a constant reminder for us this entire season that like we need to remember. Sorry, the chat box is, I need to figure out how to keep that off because I keep reading messages while I'm thinking or listening. For us, we really we set aside high standard for success. For example, in how we operate with our livestock, we really set a standard for low stress and bringing those values of communication and empathy, patience, vulnerability into that very setting, which often seems maybe a little funny. Like we think of vulnerability in a setting like this, but we feel that practicing that vulnerability on a daily basis in our actions with our animals, with our stock dogs, with each other, our team, and with the land, allows for that to be easier in these spaces. And so for us, if we're successful, but those values weren't in place, and if we're successful, but we didn't use patience, then we feel comfortable acknowledging that actually that was a failure. And to readjust, we often go back to our budget. And that's not just in a financial sense, but also in a sense of just our energy and our time. Where do we need to adjust our budget to include time to practice those values? Maybe we sit down as a team and we just practice our communication. We practice our patience and our empathy and our softness, and we set aside time and space for that. Which allows us to be really grateful for those opportunities to fail. That's really what embracing failure has looked like for us this season on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I love embracing the opportunity to fail. Lastly on this quickly, Donica, you guys experienced a lot this past year in 2020, being in Northern California, excuse me, with the fires. And I know, I don't think we talked that we would talk about this with you, but can you talk a little bit about that and how it was out of your control and what that meant for you for embracing change?
Yeah, I mean, climate change and these catastrophic events like wildfires are impacting everyone. And for those of us on the ground, sort of right on the front lines, working to save our stock, it was a solid month of crisis for us. And we had assisted in the previous years other ranchers, but when you're in it, and when it's your everything you've built, and these animals that you've cared for, you've watched them be born and watch them grow, and it's so hard to explain just the mode of I think the only thing is that I saw a picture of me after that month of crisis of evacuating over 300 head of cattle and hauling them water and feed, and sort of watching that fire come right up to our pasture and take out our property and things that we've been building over the years, and just the power of that. Just seeing a picture of me is like, wow, that was like something that really stuck with me and galvanized in my being. But it really woke me up that like I need to to take some time to care for myself every single day to just recover from this trauma. And so that's what I've been doing is like every morning I wake up really early and I run down to the ocean and I, connect to those waves and Mother Earth. And I feel so much healthier now that I take that time, because we can be really pushing ourselves as ranchers, and there's always something to do, there's always work to be done, and we don't want to see ourselves as those 70-year-old men who can barely walk because they've treated their bodies so rough with the work. And then one other thing to say about that crisis is like my kids living through that was their first time really living through crisis like that. I feel like each one of them changed. I mean, they all stepped up and worked like adults and didn't take breaks and took care of themselves. And I think that we're going to see that more, and that sort of training and mental ability to just be in the moment and do what needs to be done is so key to sort of looking at the future that we're all facing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It was amazing to follow your story. It was heroic. Because of time, we're gonna skip, because we have a lot of amazing questions. We're gonna skip to our last topic, and I think Donica, you just introduced it really well. And that's going to be looking forward and being stewards of the land and of the next generation. Julie, you dedicated your life in a way to teaching the next generation. What, in your opinion, is the most important skill or piece of knowledge or anything that the next generation needs to know?
Well, I don't think we're going to fix anything if we don't know ourselves in a more whole and decent way. I mean, I've made emotional intelligence as part of the curriculum here at our ranch. I mean, it's part of the work that our apprentices have to do. It's not just learning how to pull a calf, how to do a pasture plan, how to identify forage. It's understanding what they're putting out energetically into the world, learning to take responsibility for that. And then, like, collectively as a team, we actively talk about what Donica was just saying. It's like, we just abuse, this is a profession and an industry that is built on people exhausting and abusing themselves. And when you look at this next generation coming in, they are not going to settle for what my husband grew up with and what his kids grew up with. And so I think that finding that thing that restores you to balance every day, so that what you put out into the world is coming as best you can from love. Like, if we can't get that right, we're not going to fix shit with the land, with climate change, with racial inequality, with the rampant sexism that our apprentices still exist. When they try to move from a hand to a management position, women are still held back. So they've got to have that core of love and strength so that they don't become bitter. A lot of men around here talk about, well, there are good women in ranching, but they are meaner than snot. I mean, nobody wants to be that person because they had to be in order to function in this world. So that has to change. That core has to change. So we kind of come back to that over and over and over, that this is whole person education. It isn't just learning some manual skills.
Yes. I love that. Beth, curious, because you also have a connection with teaching and with raising children and in a rural America. what do you see for the future as something that we could take away that's really important?
Man, hard to top Julie there. That's yeah, that's been a big reflection for me this year too, is just thinking about how I take care of myself. One of the silver linings of the pandemic for our family has been just having my kiddo and my husband at home, and spending more time together, and really just like grounding in so much love and really just enjoying each other's company. And I think the other thing is just like, how can I use my platform and my privilege to give all people access to the luxuries that I enjoy every day, which is connection to land, connection to nature, having time to just like sit and be silent and feel like both like alone and completely connected to everything. I think that's a fundamental human right. So that's my hope for the future, is that we can give more people access to that.
Yeah, I like that everyone's starting to touch on taking care of ourselves as well. I think we've all touched on it. It's overlooked. April, you focus a lot of that at taking care of ourselves. Is there anything that we can do? We make sure anything simple. I know you have a lot of resources at the Wild Rose Center, but that we can do to make sure that we're in check personally.
I think one of the things that we might look at is this concept of women wearing many hats. I think that it's an ongoing thing with me now, as I hear it a lot from other women. But I think when we start saying we wear many hats, we start compartmentalizing ourselves, and we forget that we're a whole person. So we need to, not say that I'm wearing my mom hat, I'm just wearing my April hat. And, and things like that. And I don't think that this whole concept of wearing many hats is a healthy way of us looking at ourselves. Men do it too, but women in particular, we really seem to do that. So culturally, when you're going to ask somebody for, have some healing or something like that, one of the things that they really watch, they don't really talk to you a whole lot, it's kind of boring, but they'll watch you, how you walk and how you move on the land. And, one of the things that we don't really do, if we're not in agriculture, not many people get out onto the land. So that's just one of the ways, is how should we be walking and moving out on the land? Because the earth really it will take your fears, it will take your challenges, it'll keep you grounded, but you just need to get out and move on it, because how you move in the city is different than how you move on land. So I would say that would be one of the things that, for people who don't have that opportunity, find a way, go visit a farmer or, a rancher or something like that.
Absolutely. That is fantastic. Meegan, what do you think about for the future? What are your thoughts on for the next generation and what we have to look forward to or work on?
Well, I think, as a mother, Meegan as a mother, I think raising this next generation with everything that we're learning, I feel like we are on someone mentioned in the chat, a tidal wave. I feel like we're in it, especially this group, thinking about raising this next generation beyond chores. We need to be able to show them how to see the land with their eyes wide open, their hearts wide open, how to, work in co-opetition with other farmers and ranchers instead of competition. We think a lot here about, I don't know if you can see behind me, but we're grass farmers, and, maybe connecting with someone that might want to finish beef on that. And how might we work that relationship? That's co-opetition. And really coming from, that's what I love about this group. And it took me a long time to step into this group. I had some different notion of what it was, but it was absolutely mind blowing. Thanks, Amber, earlier this fall, and I was like, I'm in this thing. This is a whole bunch of brains I want to share and figure out how to bring my kids into ranching, keeping it simple and keeping it real. And I feel like and I think Candace mentioned that too, just keeping it simple. This is not complicated. We just have to love each other and talk and get energy from each other to keep doing the things we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeping it simple. Amber, can you keep it simple? And even though it's a large question of what kind of you see for the future and looking forward and working within your area of expertise within rural economies?
Well, unfortunately, I can't keep it simple if I'm going to go down this route. I think what I'm seeing here, and a good friend, Bill Melton, calls our million-acre neighborhood here in central and northern eastern Montana, there are great people and great organizations who are trying to understand what potential levers can be pulled to create equitable land access for the next generation. And the two organizations that I see pushing this the hardest, just right here in my community, are the Winnet Aces and the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance. They've been at it easily for 3 years. It seems like every time we have a glimmer of hope, it doesn't come together. And I think, recognizing that agriculture production has moved so far away from agricultural land values. So my husband and I have the privilege of stewarding a massive amount of native prairie. It's very, very likely we will never have the privilege of, in our capitalist system, owning any part of this. And I see, what I read is that 60% of our lands are going to change hands in the next 8 to 10 years. 60% is a huge number. So what can we design and create that gets people with the energy, the desire, the passion, access to that land to steward it better? So there's a lot of work to be done. I know the other day we had a gentleman at our house and we were eating pie, and he got really teary-eyed and he said, 200,000 acres of land is for sale directly on my borders. He goes, it's so high priced. I don't know who my neighbors will ever be. I don't know who my children will be ranching with. And it was very distressing to him and distressing to me as well, but also very, very hopeful. I believe there's going to be opportunities for people to be here and doing this work. And it's going to take a lot more cooperative, collaborative, open-minded ways of viewing it for people to have access. And for my husband and I to have access was a 7-year relationship building with the person who owns this land. And then it took him offering us a lease rate that is below market lease. If my husband and I were here paying a fair market lease, we would have been broke immediately, is the reality. And so it takes cooperation from every level within the story. And so our lease rate is about a quarter below fair market. What we ask of our grazing clients, there's people in this community getting $44 a head per month. and we are well below that, right? So it has to work for our landowner, it has to work for us, it has to work for our grazing clients, and also recognizing what type of wage you can pull off of these lands. And it has to be a livable wage, but it's likely not going to be what a person could make if I left here and moved to Billings or Bozeman or Helena. So there's a lot more to be done. There's a lot more work to do, but I continue to feel hopeful and inspired, particularly with people that are in this room. I mean, this is where my hope lies.
Yeah, agreed. And one of the, to kind of wrap us up before our Q&A, I see a new face in there with Candace, Nicole, and it's great to see you. It's the power of seeing two beautiful women on screen, like all of you beautiful women. Can you two talk about and kind of end us on just the power of what we saw here today, of connection between women in working the land, and the importance of the relationships that we forge together?
You're unmuted, gal.
Oh,
they
gosh.
want to hear from you.
No.
They do.
Yeah, it's been extraordinary, I think, for me in part being involved with the Women in Ranching, because like many of us, and I've had these conversations with quite a few of you, I think Paige, Lynn, we had quite a deep conversation about, we end up playing the roles almost like men and then kicking ourselves because we're not strong enough or we're not crazy enough maybe to work those kind of hours. And I didn't see the importance of having like a Women in Ranching group, and yet I've realized how many powerful women I get to interact on a regular basis, and how much inspiration I get from that, and how we're having different conversations right now. And it's very much about connecting to land or animals or family or equity at a really deep, heartfelt level that I think we have an opportunity over from many of the men in our lives. And I see they're lifting their game, but I've had so much value from being in this group. And it's amazing how many of you I can see there that I've come and visited you and hung out on the ranch and learning from each other. And it is that collective mycelial networks that we're building that creates resilience and creates strength, and means that we can reach out when we're really struggling. And I think in the past, we all have that independent sense of not sharing our vulnerabilities. And I'm loving how we can create that vulnerable space. So thank you. I've got a lot from these last few years.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to move into, I think it's a perfect time to answer a few of you guys' questions and comments for the next 15 minutes. The first, and every panelist, please open, unless we have a few that are targeted, but otherwise jump in. One of the things we've asked, we got a couple questions on, are what are the specific networks, Facebook groups or other organizations for women in agriculture? And another related comment was that, it's beautifully written, imagine to be able to connect this way regularly, hearing these stories and remind us what we're doing and why we're doing it. So who has some examples of where this connection can be made?
Ooh, Amber, are you going to tell them about the weekly check-in calls that are an option? Because that's a great example of how we're trying to cultivate just the space and the energy that women can come together and share and inspire each other and lift each other up and answer hard questions. Put the info in the chat.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, Amber, put the info in the chat. Yes, we do have a weekly Zoom call it's open to everyone, so she'll put that in there, and that is, we get to do this every week. Wouldn't that be amazing? Next question, Paige, Lynn. Do you have an online platform? Is the question?
No. Instagram. I have a social media platform, Instagram.
Mind sharing that?
Yeah, I can add that again right now.
Awesome. And also there was a comment for you. You may need to put your microphone on mute. Got it. Okay. And then so I'm going to say the comment. from Ruth. This aspect, something you spoke about earlier, is stirring up some challenges about failures. I experienced a sense of failure because I separated and divorced my husband. The separation resulted in also leaving the farm and the dream of feeling like an authentic as a farmer. Also acknowledging that the sense of love to create a family was also wrapped up in creating an ecological farm of purpose and meaning. Wow. That's pretty outstanding.
Wow. And a practice in vulnerability in itself for sharing. Thank you. Yeah, I was almost hesitant when you asked me that question about failure to repeat the word failure, because we really have just an interesting mindset around failure in our culture, don't we? But that story really resonates with me, that my partnership, I think I mentioned it a little bit, my partnership broke up after 4 years this year, and we sold off about 300 animals and kept just a handful of I am the only one that kept a handful of my best breeding does, and lost our housing opportunity and a lot of land access. And I remember that it was a decision that we made, but it still felt as though I had failed because I'd been trying so hard to hang on to those things that were slipping away. And it, for me, at least for me personally, and I know it's different for everybody's journey through failure and success is unique. And that's why these moments of vulnerability are so important, to be able to learn from each other and hopefully find inspiration to move forward. But for me personally, it was just a change of perspective, recognizing that it wasn't a closed door, it was an open door, and embracing that opportunity. That really it's a part of this lifestyle. And I'm sure that's not unique to our industry, that things have to die in order for life to go on. And it's just the cycle. And so really embracing it, and it becomes a blessing. For me, it became a blessing because I realized it opened up space for me to start the family that Women in Ranching showed me that I could start. There was space to be a woman and produce another life. And so I get to start a family this year. I'm due in June with my first baby, which is, so much for being a failure. But thank you so much for sharing that. It's important to say out loud, and I hear you. I think we all hear you, we all see you, and we're here to support each other. And if you don't have that in your close community or in your household, the Women in Ranching community is there exactly for that reason, for women who feel that way and need somebody to lean on.
Amber, there is a question. Is Women in Ranching open to prospective ranchers, farmers, or do you know of a support network that is available to women farmers, particularly in Europe, internationally?
So that is a really good question. And I don't think I can answer that for Europe or internationally. If some of you have resources, could you please put those into the chat? I can say you're always welcome. Our community check-in calls begin next week. I put the dates in the chat and my email. Please just email me and I am happy to send you the Zoom link, and we'll start on Wednesday. And also stateside, I would point to Julie Sullivan and the New Agrarian program. It's a wonderful place to gain education and knowledge and incredible mentorship.
And then Amber, again, I'm asking you to say a simple answer for a really tough question. But someone asked, and I think it's important to get to, what is ancient trauma that we carry in relation to our own trauma?
I'll be honest, I'm not sure I can answer that question. I will say for myself, it is a long and great unfolding. And to be gracious with yourself as you start the journey. Reach out to people who you notice are in that process. And I think there's so many really, really valuable resources. And I would actually like to hand this question to April. If she's still here, I don't see her face.
I don't either.
Okay.
I'm here. I just don't have
Oh.
video.
Okay.
There we go. So April, and we had another question for you too. Ancient trauma, how that affects us personally, and maybe we can just guide people towards resources of how to heal.
So a good way would be epigenetics. But what they've proven through science actually is that the trauma that your ancestors have gone through is carried through your genes and into your present day life. So what happened to my grandparents years ago, I've inherited some of that. And what it does is it's a way of looking at, I think it's a survival tool. So when you have that trauma that you're carrying with you, you react or act in certain ways in situations that were beneficial in the past. But what also happens is that it might shut you down to looking at a wider or a new view of the future. So it is definitely changeable. And I have a good friend who's an author, and she said, I refuse to pick up my grandmother's trauma.
Nicole, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think April said it really, really well. And there's a lot of studies just to show how this inherited trauma changes the expression of our genes and how it changes our ability to react or be proactive, or our attraction to certain people or certain situations. Like, how much of that is actually preordained by what was happening in the womb and with your great grandmother or your great grandfather, that they pass these messages down. But it doesn't mean that we are entrenched and stuck in this. And it's being able to see what were some of these inherited traumas and what are we have accountability. We have the ability to respond by being able to start to see it and unravel it. I've got an interesting one in terms of, like, my family, we have a strong Irish lineage, and the Irish believe that life is struggle and that you shouldn't have money. And it's like, okay, all right, well, how do we address some of that? Or that we should hate the English. And so it's a really interesting dynamic to start to unravel and look through where's that come from, and it's not mine. And thank you, with love and gratitude and appreciation, I'm going to give you that back. And it's been a fantastic process that my mother and I have really delved deeply in terms of it's not mine. It's not mine to keep. I'm not taking it.
Absolutely. Let's see. Julie, it seems like you hit, when you talked about the mosaic, you touched a nerve. The chat box went off. So there's a comment, and maybe it's not particularly a question, but maybe you can just explain a bit more. Lydia wrote, I feel like the necessary mosaic is sidelined by common identities and rhetoric in agriculture. It is perhaps why women are often underrepresented in production in regenerative agriculture.
It's really interesting. I'll mention underrepresented first, at least my thought on that. I think that here's a case in point. My husband and I started a marketing co-op for small ranchers to be able to market our grass-fed beef collectively, so we can, like, supply fresh meat through the year, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, during those calls, the men on the call refer to the livestock as being Charlie's livestock or George's livestock or Daniel's livestock. None of those operations function without the woman. She is never mentioned. Drives me, I was going to say fucking crazy. It drives me crazy. And you can't even tell them how horrible it is that they disregard you in that way. They cannot hear it. So just, I agree. There's like a, even when you are very present and you hold tremendous power within your operation, you are still often invisibilized by the system. And I don't really have an answer to that, except that I think it's part of the mosaic. And I guess Mary Katherine Bateson's point was, and she wrote her book quite some time ago, a number of decades ago. It was when, at least here in the United States, basically there were lots of buyouts and businesses collapsing. And so the model that men had for identity, that basically you started a job at 16 or 18, and that's what you did your whole life, was no longer true even for them. And her point was that women have always had lives that were episodic, that were defined, particularly if you choose to be a mother, your life is defined by particular episodes in your life. And then different opportunities, different riches, different priorities emerge at different times. And that our lives have never been a straight line. Our lives have never been a single story. Our lives, and so what April said really resonated with me, because I think we need to figure out a way that it isn't different sort of random shards of shit that we put together and call our life or call our identity, which I think is how it feels, though, like the multiple hats and, oh my God, I have 15 on right now and they don't all fit and I want to burn them all. I think that it is that sense of how can we take those disparate pieces, and in the way the gorgeous mosaics that exist in the world have created beauty out of fragments and something whole out of fragments. I think that was her point about women have always done that, because until you could control your fertility, you didn't have a choice. Now we have some choices about that, at least some of us do in our lives. And so how do we find the power and the beauty of building the mosaic, but making it a coherent picture, which I think was part of what April was getting at, rather than it being sort of this, I'm trying to separate myself into 15 different people. How do I bring all of these different requests and drives and ambitions and goals into a center and make something whole out of that? So that's how I interpret that. And I think it's really a powerful metaphor for the women in ranching movement.
Yes, absolutely. That is a perfect place to end with that, Julie. Thank you for that. Amber, Donica, Candace, Nicole, Julie, Beth, Meegan, Paige, Lynn, April, and thank you so much for sharing today. And Elaine, thank you so much for putting this together. And you will be able to find us, Women in Ranching. Just Google that. It's westernlandowners.org/women in ranching. Amber will help you guide to figure out where to be a part of this community more, and to continue these open and vulnerable conversations that connect us all together into our purpose and to our land. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and a massive virtual hug to all of you.